Hi everyone, and welcome back to Murder Eyes. Before we dive in, I want to know where you are watching from and what the weather is like in your part of the world today. Let me know in the comments. Case number 1 is that of Hyfern Kimberly Dorvalier. A mother's first job is to keep her baby safe. Hyfern Dorvalier did the exact opposite. In 2017, in Lakeland, Florida, she had a baby girl. Then she drove that newborn to a dark, empty road. She poured a flammable liquid on her own child and set her on fire. The baby was left there to die. This was not a quick, hidden crime. It was a slow, cruel act of destruction. The baby, who investigators called Anna, was found by someone driving by. She had terrible burns and did not survive. Police caught Dorvalier through careful detective work. They used evidence and followed her movements to prove she was the mother and that she committed the crime. She could not escape what she had done. She was charged with first-degree murder and child abuse. In December 2023, Hyfern Dorvalier was sent to prison for life with no chance of ever getting out. The court gave its punishment, but it cannot fix what was broken. There is no real answer to the question this crime leaves behind. How can a mother's first choice be to kill her child in such a horrible way? The prison sentence is an ending for the law, but the shock and the sadness of that question will always remain. Case number 2 is that of Siobhan Thomas. A parent's home should be a child's shelter from the world. For 2-year-old Zaya Singleton, his mother's mind became a trap. Siobhan Thomas was deep in the grip of drugs and severe mental illness. She believed in terrifying delusions. This was the ultimate betrayal of care, when the person meant to protect you cannot tell what is real and what is not. In November 2021, in their Hartford, Connecticut apartment, those delusions took a final, horrifying turn. Thomas decapitated her own toddler son, in a state beyond understanding. She then placed the child's head inside her freezer. When police arrived for a wellness check, they found a scene of absolute nightmare. Thomas had also taken her own life. There was no dramatic chase or trial. The discovery itself was the moment of reckoning. Police found the scene, pieced together the tragedy from the evidence, and confirmed Thomas as the sole perpetrator. The case was closed by the horrific facts alone. Because she was deceased, no criminal charges were formally filed. The legal system had no one left to punish. This case leaves us with a chilling truth about the line between illness and evil. When a mind breaks so completely, it can destroy the very thing it loves most. Justice here is not a prison sentence. It's the heavy silence after the storm. It's the unbearable question of what might have been if help had arrived before the delusions won. The real sentence is the permanent loss, a little boy whose world ended in the one place it should have been safest. Case number 3 is that of Vanette Ovold, also known as Chrysla Resurrection. Some trust their parents to heal them. Others trust their faith. For a little girl named Woodline, both of these trusts were weaponized against her. Her mother, Vanette Ovold, was a religious extremist. She belonged to a group called Chrysla Resurrection, which rejected modern medicine. This was a betrayal not just of motherhood, but of reason itself. Her child's pain became a test of faith. In 2019, in Naples, Florida, 7-year-old Woodline suffered a broken femur. Instead of taking her to a doctor, Ovold treated the agonizing break by pouring gasoline on her daughter's leg. She believed it would cleanse and heal. But that was only the start. Convinced the girl was possessed by evil spirits due to her illness, Ovold then began to starve her. For weeks, she withheld food, believing it would drive the demons out. The combination of starvation, a severe untreated injury, and chemical burns was too much. Woodline died in that home, a victim of brutal neglect disguised as devotion. The turn came from the very community Ovold trusted. Members of her religious group eventually went to the police, horrified by the child's death. Their statements broke the case open. Investigators found Woodline's emaciated body and evidence of the gasoline treatment. Vanette Ovold was charged with first-degree murder and aggravated child abuse. She was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison. The tragedy here is a warning about the price of blind faith. When belief demands the sacrifice of a child's life, it is not piety. It is profound cruelty. Woodline needed a doctor, not an exorcist. Her mother gave her gasoline and starvation instead of help and food. The life sentence cannot give Woodline her childhood back. It only marks the spot where love was completely twisted into torture, all in the name of a higher power that never asked for such a sacrifice. Case number 4 is that of Nakira Griner. When a child goes missing, we trust a parent's plea for help. We join the search. We share the photo. Nakira Griner poisoned that well of community trust from the very first moment. The betrayal here is a double crime. First, the murder of her son. Second, the calculated lie that sent an entire city looking for a boy who was already gone. In February 2023, in Indianapolis, Nakira Griner reported her 4-year-old son, Judah Morgan, missing. She told police a chilling story of a stranger breaking in and snatching him from his bed. An Amber Alert was issued. The community rallied. But detectives noticed her story didn't add up. The evidence in the home didn't match her tale of a violent abduction. Here is where the story turns. While police and volunteers searched for a living boy, Griner knew the terrible truth. Judah was not taken. She had beaten her son to death, dismembered his little body, and burned his remains in a backyard fire pit. The search was a cover-up for an act of unspeakable violence. Her story collapsed under the weight of the facts. Forensic evidence from the home and the fire pit told the real story. Griner was arrested and confessed to the brutal killing. She was charged with murder, neglect of a dependent resulting in death, and obstruction of justice. In a plea deal, she was sentenced to 60 years in prison. The final blow in this case is the theft of a proper goodbye. By creating a fictional kidnapping, Griner robbed a community of its chance to mourn a real boy and robbed Judah of dignity even in death. Her life forced people to hope for a miracle that was impossible from the start. The 60-year sentence is for the murder, but it is also a punishment for that cruel deception, for making a city look for a light in the darkness, while she alone knew the light had already been brutally and permanently snuffed out. Case number 5 is that of Janine Gloss. The evening bath is a daily ritual of care, a parent washing away the grime of the day and preparing a child for peaceful sleep. In a quiet suburb of Hemet, California, Janine Gliss turned this simple act of comfort into a final, unthinkable betrayal. The place meant for safety became a tomb. On an evening in July 2022, Gliss filled the bathtub in her home. But this was not for cleaning. She deliberately drowned her 3-year-old daughter, Aubrey. The details are spare and horrifying. A mother, a child, and a decision to end a life in the very water meant to soothe it. Afterward, Gliss attempted to take her own life, but was unsuccessful. The turn was immediate and somber. The incident was reported, and first responders arrived to find the tragic scene. There was no mystery to solve, only a devastating outcome to confirm. Janine Gliss was taken into custody from her home, the site of the crime. She was charged with first-degree murder. In court, she pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity. However, in February 2024, a judge found her legally sane at the time of the killing and convicted her. She was sentenced to 25 years to life in state prison. This case leaves us staring at the quiet, ordinary setting where profound evil can occur. It wasn't a dark alley or a stranger's car. It was a bathtub in a family home. The sentence provides a measure of accountability, but it cannot answer the question that lingers in the steamy air of that bathroom. What passes through a person's mind in the moment they decide to hold their child underwater, to watch the trust in their eyes turn to confusion, and then to nothing at all? The horror is in the intimacy of the act, a permanent stain on the most mundane of rituals. Case number 6 is that of Janine LePage. A mother is supposed to be a shield against the world's dangers. But what happens when she becomes convinced that the world itself is the danger, and that death is the only escape she can offer? This is the devastating betrayal enacted by Janine LePage. She mistook an ultimate act of violence for an ultimate act of mercy. In November 2019, in the small town of Alpena, Michigan, LePage's mental illness crafted a terrible delusion. She believed a dark fate awaited her children and that killing them was a kindness. While her 3 young sons slept, innocent and entirely trusting, she took a .22 caliber rifle. She shot 7-year-old Andrew and 4-year-old Luke in their beds. She then turned the gun on 3-year-old Billy, but he survived the gunshot wound. Finally, she turned the rifle on herself, taking her own life. The turn came with the morning light. A family member discovered the horrific scene and called the police. There was no manhunt. The perpetrator was already dead beside 2 of her victims. The investigation pieced together the sequence from the forensic evidence and LePage's own troubled history. Because Janine LePage was deceased, no criminal charges were ever filed. The legal case was closed. This tragedy forces a grim meditation on the corruption of love. In a fractured mind, the deepest affection can twist into its most destructive opposite. The boys were not saved from a cruel world. They were robbed of the chance to ever experience it. Their mother's final act was not protection, but a permanent theft. The silence in that house after the gunshots is the loudest sound of all. A silence filled with the absence of laughter, of growth, of futures that were erased by the very person who gave them life. Justice here is not a verdict. It is the lifelong burden carried by the one surviving son, and the eternal question of what might have been if the illness had been met with intervention instead of a bullet. Case number 7 is that of Michelle Heal. We leave our children with a caregiver based on one thing above all else: trust. It is a sacred delegation of our most precious responsibility. For little Olana Chickering, that trust was placed in Michelle Heal, a longtime family friend. The betrayal here is all the more profound because it was committed by someone welcomed into the inner circle, someone presumed to be a second layer of protection. In May 2021, in Wausau, Wisconsin, while babysitting 21-month-old Olana, Michelle Heal's patience shattered. The toddler was fussy, as toddlers are. In a moment of rage, Heal violently shook the little girl. The force was catastrophic, causing devastating brain injuries. When Olana became unresponsive, Heal did not immediately call for help. Instead, she searched the internet for terms like child not breathing and unresponsive child, wasting precious minutes. By the time emergency services arrived, it was too late. Olana Chickering died from her injuries 2 days later. The turn came from the digital trail and the cold, hard facts of medical science. Heal's frantic internet searches provided a damning timeline. More importantly, forensic pathologists determined the injuries could only have been caused by violent, forceful shaking, an injury wholly inconsistent with any accidental fall a toddler might have. Michelle Heal was charged with first-degree reckless homicide and child abuse. In April 2023, she was sentenced to 15 years in prison. The sentence provides a quantity of years, but it cannot quantify the loss of a future built on baby steps and first words. Olana's death exposes a chilling truth about violence against children. It often requires no weapon other than adult hands. It happens in an instant, in a flash of frustration in an otherwise ordinary home. The prison term holds the perpetrator accountable, but the real, enduring sentence is served by the parents whose trust was weaponized against their child, who now live with the knowledge that the safest place they could imagine became the most dangerous place on earth. Case number 8 is that of Raquel Ramirez. To stand by and do nothing is a choice. When a child is being hurt, that choice becomes a form of violence itself. This is the passive, chilling betrayal of Raquel Ramirez. She was the mother, the first line of defense for her 2-year-old daughter, Eliza. But instead of a defender, she became a spectator to her daughter's destruction, allowing her partner to wage a campaign of torture. For months, in their California home, Ramirez's partner, Johnny Vega, brutally abused little Eliza. The details are horrific: biting, beating, burning. The child was covered in injuries. And through it all, Raquel Ramirez was present. She saw it. She failed to stop it. She failed to report it. She failed to take her daughter and run. Her inaction was a silent permission slip for violence. The abuse escalated until, in March 2022, it became fatal. Eliza succumbed to her extensive injuries. The cause of death was blunt force trauma. The turn came from the medical professionals who saw what Ramirez chose to ignore. When the child's body was examined, the evidence of prolonged, savage abuse was undeniable. The timeline of injuries pointed directly to the home. Both Ramirez and Vega were arrested. While Vega, the primary aggressor, faced a murder charge, the law also saw Ramirez's complicity. Raquel Ramirez pleaded no contest to the charge of child abuse likely to cause great bodily injury or death. She was sentenced to 10 years in state prison. This case is about the crime of omission. The prison sentence is for failing to act, for allowing the unthinkable to become routine. Eliza's short life was filled with pain her mother witnessed, but did not halt. The justice system can punish the hand that struck the blows and the eyes that watched them fall. But it cannot answer the most haunting question of all. What goes through a person's mind as they watch their own child suffer and choose, day after day, to do absolutely nothing? That is a darkness no prison cell can fully contain. Case number 9 is that of Shmar Harris. A child's hunger is a primal, unmistakable signal. It is a need so basic that answering it is the bare minimum of care. For 4-year-old Thaddeus, that signal was sent again and again into a void of neglect. His mother, Shmar Harris, chose to ignore it. The betrayal here is one of slow, quiet annihilation. She didn't lash out in a moment of rage. She starved him over time, watching him disappear. Harris was living off the grid with her son in a South Bend, Indiana, hotel room in 2021. Isolated from view, she withheld food. When Thaddeus begged or cried from hunger, she punished him. This was a calculated deprivation. By the time his little body was discovered, the 4-year-old boy weighed a mere 24 pounds. He was skeletal, his body consuming itself. He was rushed to the hospital but could not be saved. He died from complications of severe malnutrition and neglect. The turn came too late for Thaddeus, but it came from the outside world. Someone associated with Harris finally called the police for a wellness check. Officers forced their way into the hotel room and found the emaciated child. The scene was one of profound, visible neglect that spoke for itself. Harris was arrested at the scene. Shmar Harris was charged with neglect of a dependent resulting in death. In August 2023, she was sentenced to 30 years in the Indiana Department of Correction. Thaddeus's sentence was death by inches, imposed by the person who should have nourished him. His mother's 30-year sentence is for the act of watching him fade away and doing nothing. This case is a grim reminder that violence isn't always loud. Sometimes it is the silent, daily decision to withhold love in its most fundamental form, food. The prison term marks the years Harris will spend confined, but it stands in for the lifetime of growth, of meals, of birthdays that Thaddeus never got to have. His greatest need was ignored until he simply ceased to be. Case number 10 is that of Heather Barbera. A family home holds memories, heirlooms, and a shared history. For 79-year-old Mary Barrett and 61-year-old Alice Rood, it was their sanctuary. Their granddaughter and niece, Heather Barbera, was family, a connection that should have represented care, or at the very least, a blood bond that commanded basic decency. Barbera's betrayal was a transaction. She saw her elders not as people, but as obstacles to be removed for what was in their wallets. In September 2019, in Saginaw Township, Michigan, Barbera went to the home her grandmother and aunt shared. The details of the attack are brutally straightforward. She bludgeoned both women to death with a nightstick. Mary and Alice were beaten to death in the place they felt safest. But the horror didn't end with the violence. Barbera then proceeded to rob them. She took their credit cards, their car, and their identities. She went on a shopping spree, spending their money while their bodies grew cold in the home she left behind. The turn came from the very trail of greed she left. Using the victim's credit cards so brazenly created an instant digital footprint. Surveillance footage from stores showed her making purchases. When family members grew concerned and police investigated, the evidence was overwhelming and grotesque. She was caught with the victim's property, her alibi shattered by her own financial transactions. Heather Barbera was charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder, armed robbery, and financial transaction device fraud. In 2023, she was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The final, chilling note of this case is the calculation. This wasn't a crime of passion or mental break. It was a business plan. Barbera traded the lives of her family for a temporary shopping haul. The life sentence ensures she will never spend another dollar of stolen money, but it cannot restore the sanctity of that home. It stands as a monument to a particular kind of evil, one where love and loyalty are worth less than a new pair of shoes, and where the end of a life is just the first step in a petty, pathetic scheme.